Welcome to another slow, quiet journey through the past. Tonight, we will drift into the Middle Ages, but not the version you think you know. Because many of the things you've always heard about medieval life were never true at all. The picture in your mind of villagers who believed the world would suddenly end at the edge of the ocean is only a legend. Educated people in monasteries, in royal courts, and in universities had long known that the earth was round. They watched ships disappear over the horizon, they read the writings of ancient scholars, and they mapped the stars with careful hands. The tale of a flat earth was invented centuries later, as a way to make the past look foolish. And then there is the idea that people in the Middle Ages never bathed. We picture dirty peasants covered in filth, living in villages that smelled of smoke and mud. But in truth, rivers, tubs, and even public bathhouses were part of daily life. Soap made of fat and ash was used, and hot water was poured into wooden barrels for soaking. Some towns even had places where steam and heated pools were available. Of course, standards were not like ours today, but the myth of constant filth is exaggerated. When we think of knights, we often imagine the heavy clang of steel armor, almost impossible to move in. But real armor was designed for combat, not for show. Chainmail was common, light enough for travel and fighting. Later plate armor was carefully made to bend at the joints. Knights could ride, swing swords, and even run while wearing it. The image of a stiff metal statue, frozen in movement, comes more from modern stories than from history itself. And what of the terrible Iron Maiden? The spiked coffin that closes in on its victim? People often imagine this as the ultimate symbol of medieval cruelty. Yet no medieval record describes it. The device was created much later, during the 18th and 19th centuries, when museums and showmen wanted to shock audiences with the idea of barbaric times. The Iron Maiden was more of a theatrical invention than a real tool of punishment. Medicine, too, is often misunderstood. We imagine medieval doctors waving herbs and muttering charms. But though superstition existed, knowledge was not entirely lost. Physicians studied the works of the Greeks, Romans, and scholars from the Islamic Golden Age. They prescribed diets, herbs, and rest. They attempted surgery, set broken bones, and drained wounds. Their methods may seem primitive now, but they were based on centuries of accumulated thought. The very name Dark Ages gives us a sense of emptiness, a time where nothing advanced. Yet the truth is different. Monasteries copied and preserved ancient manuscripts. Cathedrals rose, with arches reaching higher and higher into the sky. Universities began, where students debated philosophy and law. Progress may have been slow, but it never stopped. The light of learning flickered, but it never went out. Even the image of Vikings, fierce and horned, belongs to art, not archaeology. Helmets were plain, strong, and without horns. The famous horned helmets were designed by costume makers in the 19th century, to add drama to the stage. But the real Viking warrior would never have worn something so impractical in battle. As the myths begin to fade, we see the Middle Ages differently, not as a world of foolish peasants and cruel tortures, but as a complex and evolving society. Take a breath now. Let these thoughts settle slowly, like dust in an old stone library. And as you rest, remember that history is always more subtle, more gentle, and more human than the legends we tell. This is only half of the journey. In the next part, we'll wander even deeper, uncovering more truths that were hidden behind. The story of the Middle Ages is filled with images we think we know, but so many of them are illusions. Take the castles, for example. We often imagine enormous, cold gray fortresses, always damp, always dark. In reality, castles were homes as well as defenses. Walls were painted with color, tapestries hung across rooms, candles glowed, and fires burned to keep out the chill. They were not luxurious by modern standards, but they were far from the lifeless stone prisons we often picture. Then there is the idea of peasants chained to the land, working endlessly with no joy. While life was hard and survival uncertain, people did have festivals, games, and music. Villages celebrated harvests, marriages, and saints' days. Storytelling, dancing, and simple feasts broke the rhythm of work. Even in the hardest times, joy found its way into the medieval village. We often think of witches being hunted down across the medieval world. But the great witch trials came much later, in the early modern period. In the Middle Ages, accusations of sorcery did exist, but they were far less common and less organized than we imagine. The image of thousands burned at the stake belongs more to the 16th and 17th centuries, not the 13th or 14th. Another myth is that medieval people had lifespans of only 30 years. It is true that life was shorter than today, but much of this comes from high infant mortality. Many children did not survive past early childhood. But if someone lived into their teenage years, they often reached 50, 60, or more. Old age was respected, and there were grandmothers. And what of the food? Yorkshire bland bread and gruel, nothing more. But medieval cooks used spices traded from faraway lands: cinnamon, saffron, pepper, ginger. Wealthy households served pies, roasted meats, and sweet pastries. Even poorer families ate cheese, eggs, cabbage, and occasionally fish or pork. The idea that everyone ate only stale bread is another exaggeration. When we imagine medieval towns, we often think of constant filth thrown into the streets, with no rules at all. But many towns had regulations for waste, for markets, and even for water. Guilds controlled trades, ensuring standards for bread, ale, and cloth. While life was far from modern sanitation, it was not pure chaos. Education is another surprise. It is easy to assume that everyone in the Middle Ages was illiterate. But schools existed, both attached to churches and later as independent institutions. Monks copied manuscripts, children learned Latin prayers, and merchants learned enough reading and numbers to keep records. The invention of the printing press in the 15th century would expand literacy even further, but the groundwork was already laid long before. And perhaps the most lasting myth is that the Middle Ages were only a time of violence and war. Yes, there were battles, crusades, and invasions, but there were also centuries of peace, farming, and trade. Markets bustled with cloth, salt, and grain. Pilgrims traveled along long roads, exchanging stories and ideas. Music, art, and poetry flourished in courts and taverns alike. As these stories unravel, we begin to see the Middle Ages not as a dark void, but as a mirror, reflecting both struggle and beauty, ignorance and learning, hardship and joy. The myths may be dramatic, but the truth is softer, quieter, and more human. So, as you let these thoughts drift through your mind, imagine not the legends of a grim and hopeless past, but the reality of a world full of people living ordinary lives, with the same hopes and fears, the same laughter and sorrow as us. Take another slow breath. Let your body sink into the calm. And if sleep comes, let it carry you, knowing that history is never only myth, and never only truth. It is always both. When we close our eyes and think of the Middle Ages, the images come from paintings, novels, and movies. But the real world was far quieter, far slower, and far more ordinary than the legends suggest. Think of the cities of medieval Europe. They were not endless mazes of filth and danger, though they were crowded. There were market stalls filled with fabrics, spices, bread, and cheese. Merchants shouted prices, children ran through the streets, and bells from the church towers marked the passing of hours. Life in these cities was not so different from the rhythm of towns today, filled with noise, trade, and gossip. And then, there is the idea that medieval people never traveled. But roads and paths stretched across the land, connecting villages to towns, towns to cities, and cities to distant kingdoms. Pilgrims walked for weeks to reach holy shrines. Merchants rode with their goods to sell in distant markets. Even common peasants sometimes traveled to fairs or neighboring villages. The Middle Ages were not as isolated as we imagine. There was always movement, always exchange. Another picture we often hold is that of women having no role, no voice, no power. But the reality was more complicated. Many women worked in markets, ran shops, brewed ale, and managed farms. Noble women often oversaw estates when men were at war. Some became writers, mystics, even rulers. It was a difficult world, but not one of complete silence for women. When we imagine medieval justice, we think of harsh punishments, stocks, whips, executions. Yes, they existed, but not for every crime. Often, disputes were settled with fines, or with agreements between families. Communities worked to maintain balance, rather than destroy one another. The image of constant brutality ignores the daily effort to preserve peace. And what of learning? It is true that books were rare, written by hand and precious. But in monasteries, monks bent over pages with careful strokes, preserving knowledge from centuries before. Students gathered in halls to hear lectures, reciting words, debating meanings. Education was a privilege, but it existed, slowly spreading, slowly growing. By the late Middle Ages, the seeds of modern thought were already there, waiting to bloom. Another story told again and again is that people in the Middle Ages were endlessly afraid. Afraid of the night, afraid of spirits, afraid of the unknown. But fear was only one part of life. There was also wonder. The sight of the stars in a night sky without modern lights. The sound of music in a great cathedral, echoing in stone. The joy of spring after a long winter. These moments of awe filled their lives as much as fear. The plague, of course, is often remembered as the darkest time. And yes, it swept through villages and cities with terrible speed. But even in the shadow of death, life went on. People prayed, worked, and found comfort in each other. Communities rebuilt, farms returned to harvest, families carried on. The resilience of ordinary people is perhaps the truest story of the Middle Ages. Think now of the art. When we imagine medieval paintings, we see stiff figures, strange proportions. Yet within those images are colors meant to shine in candlelight, gold leaf reflecting in sacred spaces. Music, too, carried softly through halls, chants, lutes, and simple songs. These were not dark ages without beauty. They were centuries filled with sound, color, and light, made in ways different from ours, but with the same desire to create. As myths fall away, the Middle Ages appear not as a strange, alien world, but as a place full of human lives. Farmers, merchants, nobles, monks, women, children, all living, struggling, laughing, and dreaming. The stories we tell now are shaped by centuries of exaggeration, but the truth is always gentler, always closer to our own lives. So let your thoughts drift slowly through these images. The stone walls of a quiet monastery, the laughter of a village feast, the ringing of bells across a medieval town. None of them match the myths, yet all of them are real in their own way. When people speak of the Middle Ages, they often describe a world of endless darkness, of ignorance, and of cruelty. But when we look more closely, the truth is softer, more balanced, and more human. Think for a moment about time itself. We imagine people stumbling through life without clocks, without order. Yet churches rang bells to mark hours. Sundials stood in gardens. Water clocks ticked in monasteries. People knew the rhythm of day and night, of seasons, of planting and harvest. Their sense of time was different from ours, slower perhaps, but not absent. We also think of medieval warfare as constant. Knights charging endlessly, peasants caught in battles. But most people never saw a battlefield. Their lives were spent tending animals, planting seeds, drawing water, and raising families. Wars did come, sometimes suddenly, but daily life was steadier than legends suggest. And then there is the picture of medicine. Yes, there were strange treatments, bleeding, charms, potions. But there was also careful observation, herbal remedies that still form the basis of some medicines today, and an understanding that diet, rest, and balance mattered. The human body was a mystery, but medieval healers worked to ease suffering as best they could. We imagine the Middle Ages as a world without joy. But imagine instead the great fairs. Music drifting through the air. Jugglers, storytellers, and sellers calling out their wares. Imagine children playing in fields, or villagers gathered around a fire on winter nights, telling tales to pass the time. Life was difficult, yes, but never empty of laughter. The myths of brutality also stretched to justice. We picture endless executions, dungeons, and chains. In truth, many conflicts were resolved through agreements, fines, or negotiations. Communities valued balance, because survival depended on cooperation. Punishment existed, but it was not the only form of justice. And what of knowledge? The myth tells us people thought the stars were signs of superstition only. But astronomers mapped constellations, sailors guided ships by them, and scholars calculated eclipses. There was a deep respect for the heavens, a belief that the universe had order. Their understanding was not ours, but it was careful, thoughtful, and sincere. The architecture of the Middle Ages, too, defies the myths. We think of plain stone buildings, but cathedrals rose like forests of stone and glass. Stained windows glowed in sunlight, painting colors across the floors. Carvings of saints, kings, and even playful creatures filled the walls. These were not lifeless places. They were alive with art and faith. Even in death, the myths deceive us. The idea that graveyards were overflowing, bones scattered, and people careless about burial is exaggerated. Cemeteries were places of care, prayer, and remembrance. Families visited, candles burned, and the memory of the dead was honored. The truth is always this. The Middle Ages were not only hardship, and not only wonder. They were both. A time of faith and fear, of learning and loss, of survival and celebration. As these myths unravel, what remains is a portrait of people not so different from us. They worried about food, about family, about health. They dreamed of better lives, they told stories, they built homes, and they passed on traditions. The centuries between us and them are many, but the thread of humanity remains unbroken. Now, as we end this journey, allow your thoughts to grow slower. When we think of the Middle Ages, our imagination is often shaped not by reality, but by stories told long after the time had passed. Many of those stories were designed to make the period seem strange, exotic, or even frightening. But the truth is always quieter. Consider the image of kings and queens. We often picture them in glittering halls, commanding armies, and ruling with absolute power. In reality, their authority was limited. They negotiated constantly with nobles, with bishops, with towns. A king's command could be ignored if it was unpopular, and even queens sometimes held surprising influence. Power was not absolute. It was fragile, delicate, and dependent on trust. And then there is the myth of peasants as hopeless, trapped in lives of endless misery. Yes, their work was heavy and survival could be uncertain. But they were not without pride. They shaped the land with their hands, cared for animals, built homes, and raised children. They created songs, traditions, and festivals that carried joy into even the hardest years. Their lives were not only toil, they were also full of meaning. The church, too, is often misunderstood. People imagine it as a force of pure control, crushing thought and silencing knowledge. But monasteries preserved ancient texts, cathedrals inspired architecture that still amazes us, and priests offered guidance in communities. There were abuses, yes, but there was also care, learning, and devotion. Religion was not only a cage. For many, it was a source of comfort and light. We sometimes believe that medieval people never laughed, that they lived only in fear. But humor existed everywhere. Jesters in courts, funny tales told by villagers, and even scribes who drew little jokes in the margins of serious manuscripts. There was playfulness in the Middle Ages, just as in every other age. Education spread more than we realize. Universities grew, drawing students from across Europe. People debated philosophy, studied law, and searched for patterns in the stars. The printing press would later transform learning, but the foundation was already there. The idea that the Middle Ages were empty of thought is a myth created by later centuries who wanted to see themselves as superior. Travel, too, is often forgotten. Pilgrims crossed mountains to reach distant shrines. Merchants carried salt, wool, and wine along trade routes. Even stories traveled, tales that would become part of folklore, legends whispered in one land and retold in another. The medieval world was not locked in isolation. It was connected slowly but surely by footsteps and wheels and sails. We imagine only knights and nobles in shining halls, but there were also storytellers, musicians, and ordinary craftsmen. The sound of a lute in the evening, the carving of wood into tools, the weaving of cloth at a loom. Small acts of creativity filled the days. These are not dramatic stories, but they are the real heart of the past. And so, when we peel back the layers of myth, what we find is not a world of shadows and terror, but one of balance. Hardship and joy, faith and doubt, tradition and change. The Middle Ages were not a fantasy world nor a nightmare. They were simply another chapter of human life, lived by people not so different from us. As you drift deeper into calm, imagine walking through a medieval street at dusk. The smell of bread lingers in the air. Merchants pack away their goods. Candles flicker in windows, lighting small rooms one by one. A cat slips quietly across a cobbled path. The church bell rings once, twice, then falls silent. The world slows. The myths fade. What remains is simply life, ordinary and enduring. Breathe gently now. Let the stories dissolve into stillness. The Middle Ages are not so far away, after all. They live in our memories, in our languages, in our traditions. And as the night grows deeper, let those quiet echoes guide you into rest. As the night deepens, the stories of the Middle Ages continue to unfold. Not the loud, dramatic tales that you may have heard, but the quiet truths that lie beneath. Think of a medieval village in the early morning. The air is still cold, mist drifting over the fields. A rooster crows. Slowly the village comes alive. A woman stirs a fire, a child carries water, a man sharpens tools for the day's work. Life was simple, but it followed a rhythm, steady as the seasons themselves. We imagine those people as distant, almost alien, but their worries were familiar. Would the harvest be enough? Would the children grow strong? Would tomorrow be kinder than today? The centuries between us do not erase the sameness of human hope. It is easy to picture medieval life as silent, but it was filled with sound. The creak of cart wheels on rough roads, the ringing of blacksmiths' hammers, the murmur of prayers in chapels, the laughter of children chasing one another through muddy lanes. Evenings brought music, a flute, a drum, a voice singing by the fire. Ordinary moments, easily forgotten, yet they filled the days. Another myth tells us that medieval people never questioned anything, that they only accepted what they were told. But in taverns, in markets, in schools, debates sparked. People argued over laws, over faith, over stories. Curiosity never vanished. The human mind has always wandered, even when records of it do not survive. We also imagine endless hunger, but the picture is more balanced. Crops did fail, winters were harsh, and famine came at times. Yet there were also years of plenty, with bread, cheese, fruit, and ale. Families gathered for feasts after harvest, sharing roasted meat and sweet pastries. Food was more varied than the myths allow. The world of the Middle Ages was also full of color. We think of gray stone walls, brown clothes, dull earth. But fabrics were dyed red, blue, green, and gold. Stained glass shimmered in sunlight. Markets were covered in bright fabrics, painted signs, and decorated stalls. The medieval world was not gray at all. It was alive with shades and tones. And then, the stories of constant superstition. Yes, people looked to the stars, to signs, to omens. But they also observed, tested, and learned. Farmers studied weather patterns. Healers noted which herbs worked best. Builders calculated balance and weight to raise cathedrals that still stand today. Faith and observation lived side by side. At night, under skies without modern light, the stars must have seemed endless. People walked home by torchlight, doors closed, candles flickered inside. Beyond the walls of the village, forests stretched dark and quiet, filled with mystery. That mixture of fear and wonder shaped their world. As you listen, imagine yourself sitting by the hearth in a medieval home. The fire crackles. The air smells of smoke and bread. A child leans against a parent's arm, drifting into sleep. Outside, snow falls gently, covering the fields in silence. It is not a world of myths, but a world of ordinary lives, carrying forward one day at a time. The past is not so far away. Its rhythms, its voices, its quiet moments, they echo still. And now, as your body grows heavier, let those echoes guide you further into rest. The Middle Ages often feel like a world of shadows in our imagination. But if you listen closely, the voices of that time are calm, steady, and human. Picture a monastery at dawn. The bell tolls slowly, calling monks to prayer. The corridors are cool, the stone walls echo with footsteps. In the scriptorium, men bend over parchment, dipping quills in ink, copying words line by line. Hours pass in silence, broken only by the scratching of pens. These quiet acts of preservation carried the wisdom of centuries into the future. Without them, much of what we know today would be lost. Now think of a marketplace at midday. The smell of roasted meat drifts through the air. Merchants cry out selling bread, cloth, tools, and spices. A group of children laugh as they chase one another through the crowd. Musicians play a soft tune on a lute, hoping for a coin or two. Life in the Middle Ages was not only work and prayer, it was filled with sound, trade, and laughter. The myths often tell us that medieval people were cut off from the wider world. Yet travelers returned with silk from the east, pepper and cinnamon from distant markets, and stories of lands beyond imagination. Pilgrims walked for weeks or months, their journeys connecting villages to kingdoms, and kingdoms to continents. The world was never as small as we believe. Another common picture is that people in the Middle Ages feared learning, feared new ideas. But the truth is different. Universities grew, debates flourished, and scholars studied everything from philosophy to medicine. Their methods were not like ours, but their desire to understand was the same. Curiosity has always been a part of human life. In the evenings, families gathered by firelight. A grandmother might tell stories of saints and heroes. A father might hum an old song. Children listened, half awake, as the flames flickered against wooden walls. These simple scenes are often forgotten in history books, yet they formed the rhythm of medieval life. We sometimes imagine that life then was colorless. But picture a festival, banners waving, fabrics dyed in bright reds and yellows, dancers in the square, music echoing through narrow streets. Even the poorest families found moments of celebration. Life was not a gray silence. It was filled with bursts of joy. And what of fear? Yes, there was fear of famine, of disease, of war. But alongside fear was resilience. Communities rebuilt after disasters. Families continued after loss. Villages planted seeds again, even after the hardest winters. The strength to endure may be the truest story of the Middle Ages. As you rest, imagine yourself walking slowly through a medieval town at night. The streets are quiet now. A candle flickers in a high window. A dog lies curled at a doorway. The air smells of smoke and earth. The church bell rings once in the distance, then silence returns. It is not a world of endless myths. It is a world of people living as we live, with work, with joy, with sorrow, with hope. Let your thoughts drift slowly, like mist over a quiet field. Let the noise of the day fall away. The past is soft, steady, and still. And now, as your body grows heavier, sink into rest as if you too are lying beneath a medieval sky, the stars shining endlessly above. The Middle Ages stretch before us, not as a blur of myths, but as a tapestry of quiet lives. Let us wander slowly through that tapestry, and let each detail sink gently into our thoughts. Imagine walking along a winding country road. The morning mist rises from the fields. Farmers lead oxen pulling carts of grain. Chickens scatter at the sound of hooves. Smoke curls from chimneys of cottages, and somewhere nearby, a dog barks softly. Life is calm, steady, and measured by the rhythm of work and rest. Inside homes, families move quietly through the day. A mother kneads dough for bread. A father mends tools. Children chase one another through courtyards, their laughter echoing softly. Life is not easy, but it is full of small, enduring moments that hold meaning. Even the grandest halls are not silent. Lords and ladies discuss plans, servants carry water and firewood, musicians play gentle tunes. Candles flicker, casting shadows on stone walls. The daily routines of care, preparation, and conversation weave together into a world that feels lived in, warm, and connected. We often imagine the past as isolated, but it was not so. Traders move from village to town carrying spices, fabrics, and stories. Pilgrims walk long roads to shrines, sharing tales along the way. Ideas spread quietly, slowly, but persistently, linking distant places into a single network of human life. Even fear had its rhythm. Villagers watched for storms, for disease, for the occasional bandit. But fear existed alongside resilience. People rebuilt after disasters, shared resources, and found hope in each other. Hardship shaped their lives, but it did not define them entirely. Education and learning, too, moved quietly through the centuries. Monks copied manuscripts, students debated, and builders calculated arches, bridges, and towers. Observation, curiosity, and care were present everywhere, in workshops, in gardens, in quiet studies. Knowledge grew steadily, patiently, like the slow unfolding of a flower. Picture a festival in the village square. Banners wave gently in the breeze. Musicians play soft tunes. Children chase each other, and families share simple meals. Laughter mixes with the smell of bread, herbs, and roasted meat. Even the smallest joys, unnoticed by history books, filled the days with warmth. As the sun sets, imagine walking along cobbled streets. The glow of candlelight flickers through windows. Fires crackle in hearths. The sound of distant music drifts through the air. Night settles softly. The sky stretches endlessly above, filled with stars that have watched generations come and go. Even myths of brutality or ignorance fade under the weight of ordinary life. The people of the Middle Ages were human, resilient, curious, and joyful. They lived their days fully, with care, with hope, and with simple pleasures. So, as you drift into calm, let the past wash gently over you. Let the quiet streets, the fireside conversations, the laughter of children, and the endless stars guide your mind into rest. The Middle Ages are often imagined as distant and strange. But if we slow down, listen, and picture the daily life of people long ago, we see a world that is gentle, quiet, and profoundly human. Imagine a quiet morning in a village. Smoke rises from chimneys. Chickens cluck as they wander across a yard. A baker tends his oven, turning loaves slowly. A child carries a small basket of eggs to the market. The rhythm of life is slow, deliberate, and steady. Each day follows the one before, shaped by seasons, weather, and the work of human hands. Even in the grandest castles, life was a balance between duty and comfort. Lords and ladies oversaw lands, planned meals, and entertained guests. Fires burned to keep rooms warm. Tapestries hung on walls to soften the cold stone. Candles flickered as meals were served and stories were shared. Life was structured, but it was not without warmth or laughter. We often imagine only hardship, plagues, wars, and famine. And yes, these were parts of life. Yet alongside struggle were moments of care. Communities came together to help neighbors. Families supported one another. Friends shared food, stories, and songs. Survival depended on cooperation, and in this, people found purpose and connection. The streets were alive with sound. Merchants called their wares, the blacksmith hammered iron, children ran and laughed. Even simple songs carried from house to house. Life was noisy, yes, but full of small joys that history books often overlook. Education and learning quietly advanced. Monks and scribes copied texts. Students debated philosophy and law. Farmers observed weather patterns. Builders calculated balance to raise arches that still inspire awe. Knowledge grew slowly but steadily, hidden in quiet places. Imagine walking along a forest path at dusk. Birds settle, the wind rustles through the leaves, and a deer steps lightly among the shadows. Villagers return home, carrying the day's work. Candles glow through windows. Fires crackle in hearths. Life is simple, ordinary, yet profoundly alive. Even fear had its place, fear of disease, of storms, of bandits. But it was balanced with hope, with faith, and with the ordinary courage of people living one day at a time. Joy existed alongside sorrow. Music, art, laughter, and stories filled the gaps between the hardships. And as night falls, picture the sky overhead, vast and endless, untouched by city lights. The stars shine as they did centuries ago. Perhaps someone in a distant village is looking up, wondering about the same constellations, feeling a connection across time. The Middle Ages, stripped of myths and legends, are not dark. They are soft. They are alive. They are human. And in this quiet understanding, we find not only history, but a gentle reflection of ourselves. So now take a deep, slow breath. Let your body sink into calm. Let the echoes of distant voices, of firelight, of quiet streets, guide you into rest. The myths fade. What remains is life, ordinary, enduring, beautiful. The Middle Ages stretch out quietly in our imagination, but the truth is softer, calmer, and more alive than the myths suggest. Let us take another slow walk through this world, letting each detail settle gently in our mind. Imagine a village at dawn. Mist hovers above the fields. Smoke drifts from chimneys. Farmers guide oxen, pulling carts filled with grain. Chickens peck at the ground. Somewhere, a dog lifts its head and barks softly. The day begins steady, simple, and full of rhythm. Inside the cottages, families move quietly. A mother kneads bread dough. A father sharpens tools. Children chase one another around the yard, laughter ringing softly. Life is hard, yes, but it is also filled with ordinary, enduring moments, moments of care, of connection, of small joy. In the great halls, lords and ladies go about their duties. Candles flicker, casting long shadows on stone walls. Servants carry water and firewood. Musicians play gentle tunes in corners. Life is structured, but it is not without warmth, conversation, or laughter. The medieval world was not isolated. Traders traveled from town to town, carrying fabrics, spices, and news. Pilgrims walked for days or weeks to reach distant shrines, sharing stories along the way. Ideas, goods, and customs moved slowly, quietly connecting distant villages and kingdoms into a larger, human network. Even fear had its place. Storms, disease, and occasional bandits reminded people of danger. Yet resilience and hope persisted. Communities rebuilt after disasters. Families shared resources and comfort. Life continued, shaped by hardship but defined by endurance. Education and knowledge thrived quietly. Monks copied manuscripts in monasteries. Students debated philosophy and law. Builders calculated arches, bridges, and towers with care. Observation and curiosity existed everywhere, in workshops, gardens, and classrooms. Knowledge grew slowly, like a flower opening in the morning sun. Imagine a village festival. Banners flutter softly in the breeze. Musicians play gentle tunes. Children laugh as they chase one another. Families share simple meals, bread, cheese, roasted vegetables. Even the smallest joys, often lost in history books, filled the days with warmth and meaning. As the sun sets, the streets grow quiet. Candlelight flickers in windows. Fires crackle in hearths. Music drifts softly from distant corners. The night settles over the village. The sky stretches endlessly, dotted with stars that have watched centuries pass. The myths of the Middle Ages, of constant brutality, ignorance, or darkness, fade when we look closely. The people were human, resilient, curious, joyful, and full of ordinary hope. They lived, loved, worked, and laughed in ways that resonate even today. So now, take a deep breath. Let your mind settle. Imagine the quiet streets, the flickering fires, the laughter of children, and the endless stars. Above, let the past guide you gently into calm and rest. The Middle Ages are often pictured as dark and strange, but when we look closer, we see a world alive with ordinary moments, soft and steady, like a slow river. Imagine the morning in a small village. The sun rises gently. Mist lingers over the fields. A baker tends his oven, kneading dough with careful hands. Chickens wander in the yard. Smoke curls from chimneys. People move quietly, beginning the day with the rhythm of work and care. Inside homes, families start their routines. A mother prepares bread. Children help carry water. A father sharpens tools. Life is not easy, but it is alive, full of the ordinary joys and small accomplishments that shape each day. Even castles, often pictured as cold and lifeless, were centers of daily life. Candles flicker across stone walls. Lords and ladies manage their households, servants move quietly, and musicians play soft tunes in corners. The grand halls echo with life, warmth, and conversation. The medieval world was not isolated. Traders carried spices, fabrics, and ideas between villages and towns. Pilgrims traveled long roads to distant shrines, sharing stories along the way. Each journey connected lives across the land, creating quiet bonds that the myths often ignore. Fear existed, yes, storms, illness, and bandits reminded people of danger. But resilience was always present. Villages rebuilt after hardship. Families shared resources. Life continued, balanced between fear and hope, hardship and endurance. Education grew quietly. Monks copied manuscripts. Students debated law and philosophy. Builders calculated arches, bridges, and towers with careful precision. Knowledge moved slowly, patiently, like seeds growing under the earth. Picture a festival in the village square. Banners wave gently. Children laugh as they chase one another. Music drifts from nearby homes. Families share meals of bread, cheese, and roasted vegetables. Joy existed quietly in the ordinary routines of life. At night, streets are silent. Candlelight glows through windows. Fires crackle in hearths. Music drifts softly. The sky stretches endlessly, dotted with stars that have watched centuries pass. The myths of the Middle Ages fade in the face of these quiet lives. People lived fully with care, hope, and ordinary joy. Their stories echo softly across time, guiding us gently into calm and rest. The Middle Ages were a world alive with ordinary life, soft, steady, and full of quiet rhythm. Imagine a village at dawn. Mist drifts over fields. Chickens peck at the ground. Smoke rises from chimneys. A baker kneads dough carefully, preparing bread for the day. Children carry water and help in small tasks. Life is slow, deliberate, and measured by work, care, and the natural rhythm of the seasons. Inside homes, families move through their routines. Mothers prepare meals. Fathers mend tools. Children chase one another across courtyards, laughter ringing softly. Even in hardship, moments of joy and connection were ever present. In castles, daily life continued quietly. Lords and ladies oversaw their estates. Servants moved from room to room, carrying water, firewood, and food. Candles flickered across stone walls. Musicians played gentle tunes. Life was structured, yet alive, warm, and human. Even fear and danger had a rhythm. Storms, illness, and occasional bandits reminded villagers of mortality. But alongside fear existed resilience. Communities rebuilt after disasters. Families shared resources. Hope persisted, quietly guiding people forward through difficult days. Education moved gently through the centuries. Monks copied manuscripts in monasteries. Students debated philosophy and law. Builders calculated arches and towers with careful attention. Knowledge spread slowly but steadily, like seeds germinating beneath the soil. At festivals, the village square filled with life. Banners fluttered. Children laughed. Music drifted through the air. Families shared simple meals. Even ordinary joys were moments of profound meaning. Night brought calm. Candlelight glimmered through windows. Fires crackled. Music and conversation faded. The stars stretched endlessly above, unchanging, as they had for centuries. The myths of darkness, ignorance, and cruelty fade when we look closely at ordinary lives. People lived fully with care, hope, and quiet joy. Their ordinary actions echo softly across time, guiding us gently into calm and rest. The Middle Ages are often pictured as a distant, strange world. Yet if we slow down and listen, we hear the rhythm of everyday life, soft, calm, and profoundly human. Imagine a forest path at dawn. Mist rises over fields and rivers. A farmer leads oxen pulling a cart. Chickens wander in the yard. Smoke rises from chimneys. Life begins slowly, quietly, and with rhythm. Each action, from baking bread to tending animals, carries its own importance. In homes, mothers prepare meals. Children gather eggs. Fathers mend tools and repair fences. Life is difficult, but it is alive, and small joys make each day meaningful. The laughter of children, the smell of fresh bread, the warmth of the hearth, these form the heartbeat of daily life. Even in grand halls, life moves quietly. Candles flicker across stone walls. Musicians play soft tunes. Servants carry water and food. Lords and ladies oversee daily routines. Life is structured, but also warm and connected. The medieval world was not isolated. Traders moved between towns and cities, carrying fabrics, spices, and ideas. Pilgrims walked long roads to shrines, sharing stories along the way. Each journey connected distant people in subtle, quiet ways. Fear existed, storms, illness, or bandits. Yet hope and resilience balanced it. Communities rebuilt, families shared resources, and life continued, steady and deliberate. Education and knowledge thrived quietly. Monks copied manuscripts. Students debated philosophy. Builders designed arches and towers. Observation, care, and curiosity were everywhere. Knowledge grew slowly, like seeds sprouting beneath the soil. Festivals brought color and life to villages. Banners waved. Children laughed. Music drifted. Simple meals were shared. Ordinary moments of joy filled lives with meaning. Night brought quiet. Candlelight flickered. Fires crackled. Music faded. Stars shone above, as they had for centuries. Myths of darkness and ignorance fade in light of these ordinary, human moments. The Middle Ages are often imagined as mysterious or frightening, yet their true story is calm, ordinary, and profoundly human. Picture a village in early morning. Mist hovers over fields. Chickens wander. Smoke rises from chimneys. A baker kneads dough. Children carry water. The day begins in quiet rhythm, shaped by work, care, and the natural flow of life. Inside homes, mothers prepare bread. Fathers mend tools. Children chase one another, laughter ringing softly. Even in difficulty, life holds ordinary joys. Castles are alive with movement. Candles flicker on walls. Musicians play soft tunes. Servants carry water, firewood, and meals. Lords and ladies oversee daily routines. Life is structured, warm, and human. Even fear and danger had rhythm. Storms, disease, and bandits reminded people of mortality. Yet resilience and hope persisted. Communities rebuilt. Families shared resources. Ordinary courage guided daily life. Education spread quietly. Monks copied manuscripts. Students debated philosophy. Builders calculated arches and towers. Knowledge moved slowly, like seeds germinating beneath the earth. Village festivals brought joy. Children laughed. Music floated through streets. Families shared meals. Life was filled with ordinary moments of happiness. At night, streets were quiet. Candlelight flickered. Fires crackled. Music faded. Stars stretched across the sky, unchanged for centuries. Myths of cruelty and darkness dissolve when we see the ordinary lives of people who lived fully, with hope, care, and quiet joy. The Middle Ages unfold quietly, alive with ordinary life, rhythm, and gentle human moments. Imagine walking along a village road at dawn. Mist drifts over fields. Chickens wander. Smoke rises from chimneys. A baker kneads dough. Farmers guide oxen pulling carts. Children carry water. Life begins slowly, measured by work and care. In homes, mothers prepare meals. Fathers mend tools. Children laugh and play. Life is hard but full of small joys and ordinary achievements. Castles and great halls are alive. Candles flicker. Servants move quietly. Musicians play soft tunes. Lords and ladies manage estates. Life is structured, warm, and connected. Fear exists, storms, illness, bandits, yet resilience persists. Communities rebuild. Families share resources. Life continues, balanced between hardship and hope. Education thrives quietly. Monks copy manuscripts. Students debate philosophy and law. Builders calculate arches, bridges, and towers. Knowledge spreads slowly, patiently, like seeds growing beneath the soil. Village festivals bring joy. Banners wave. Music drifts. Children laugh. Families share meals. Life is alive, ordinary, and meaningful. Night brings calm. Candlelight glimmers. Fires crackle. Music fades. Stars shine endlessly above. Myths of darkness and ignorance fade before the ordinary, human lives of the people who lived fully, with care, hope, and quiet joy. The Middle Ages are often imagined as harsh and mysterious, but the truth is softer, calmer, and profoundly human. Picture a village at dawn. Mist drifts over fields. Smoke curls from chimneys. Chickens wander. A baker kneads dough carefully. Farmers guide oxen pulling carts. Children carry water, laughing softly. The day begins slowly with rhythm shaped by work, care, and nature. Inside homes, mothers prepare meals. Fathers mend tools. Children chase one another, sharing small joys. Life is hard, yes, but filled with ordinary moments of meaning and warmth. Imagine a medieval forest at dawn. Mist curls over the trees. Birds chirp softly. A deer steps lightly among the shadows. Villagers walk slowly along paths, carrying water, or tending animals. Smoke rises from chimneys. Life begins with calm, quiet rhythm. Inside cottages, families move through morning routines. Mothers knead bread. Fathers repair tools. Children chase each other, laughing. Life is hard, but small joys make each day meaningful. Even castles and grand halls are alive. Candles flicker. Servants move quietly. Musicians play soft tunes. Lords and ladies oversee daily routines. Life is structured, warm, and connected. Travel and trade were constant, though slow. Merchants carried fabrics, spices, and stories between towns. Pilgrims walked long roads to shrines, sharing tales. Ideas, goods, and customs spread, connecting people across the land in quiet ways. Fear existed, storms, disease, or bandits, yet hope and resilience balanced it. Communities rebuilt. Families shared resources. Life continued steadily, guided by ordinary courage. Education thrived quietly. Monks copied manuscripts. Students debated law and philosophy. Builders designed arches, bridges, and towers. Knowledge moved slowly, like seeds growing beneath the soil. Village festivals brought joy. Children laughed. Music floated. Families shared meals. Ordinary happiness filled lives. At night, streets became still. Candlelight glimmered. Fires crackled. Stars shone endlessly above. Myths of cruelty and ignorance fade when we see ordinary, human life. Imagine the medieval world at dusk. Villages quiet. Fires flicker in cottages. Children play one last time. Farmers return home. Smoke curls from chimneys. Life is calm, ordinary, yet profoundly alive. Inside homes, families prepare meals. Mothers knead dough. Fathers repair tools. Children laugh softly. Even in hardship, small moments bring warmth and meaning. Castles and great halls are alive. Candles flicker. Servants move quietly. Musicians play soft tunes. Lords and ladies manage estates. Life is structured, warm, and connected. Travel and trade connect villages. Merchants carry fabrics, spices, and stories. Pilgrims walk to shrines, sharing tales along the way. Ideas, goods, and customs flow quietly, linking distant communities. Fear exists, storms, disease, bandits, yet resilience persists. Communities rebuild. Families share resources. Life continues steadily. Education spreads slowly. Monks copy manuscripts. Students debate. Builders calculate arches and towers. Knowledge moves quietly, patiently, like seeds growing beneath the soil. Festivals bring joy. Children laugh. Music floats. Families share meals. Ordinary happiness fills the days. Night brings stillness. Candlelight glimmers. Fires crackle. Stars shine endlessly. The myths of darkness and cruelty dissolve, revealing ordinary human life, full of hope, care, and quiet joy. The Middle Ages stretch before us, not as a blur of myths, but as a tapestry of quiet, ordinary lives. Let us take a slow walk through this tapestry one last time, letting each detail sink gently into our thoughts. Imagine a village at dawn. Mist rises over the fields. Smoke curls from chimneys. Chickens wander through the yards. A baker kneads dough. Farmers guide oxen pulling carts. Children carry water, laughing softly. Life begins slowly, with rhythm shaped by work, care, and the natural flow of the seasons. Inside homes, families move through morning routines. Mothers prepare meals. Fathers mend tools. Children chase one another, sharing small joys. Even in difficulty, life is filled with ordinary moments of meaning and warmth. Castles and grand halls are alive with quiet activity. Candles flicker across stone walls. Servants move from room to room, carrying water, firewood, and meals. Musicians play soft tunes in corners. Lords and ladies oversee daily routines. Life is structured, warm, and human. Fear existed, storms, illness, bandits, but hope and resilience were always present. Communities rebuilt after disasters. Families shared resources. Life continued steadily, balanced between hardship and quiet joy. Education and knowledge moved quietly. Monks copied manuscripts. Students debated philosophy and law. Builders calculated arches, bridges, and towers. Knowledge spread slowly, patiently, like seeds growing beneath the soil. Imagine a village festival one last time. Banners wave softly. Music drifts through the streets. Children laugh. Families share meals. Ordinary happiness fills each day, a reminder that joy exists even in the simplest moments. Night falls. The streets quiet. Candlelight flickers. Fires crackle in hearths. Music fades. Stars stretch endlessly above, shining as they did centuries ago. The myths of darkness, ignorance, and cruelty dissolve, leaving only the gentle truth of ordinary, human life. The Middle Ages were not only hardship, nor only wonder. They were a balance of both. People lived fully with care, with joy, with hope. Their lives echo softly across centuries, guiding us into calm, rest, and quiet reflection. Now, take a deep breath. Let your body sink into calm. Let the echoes of distant voices, the flickering fires, the laughter of children, and the endless stars above carry you gently into sleep. As the Middle Ages stretch behind us, it is fascinating to revisit what we once believed about knights, castles, and daily life. Many stories passed down through centuries are not entirely accurate. Today, we explore a deeper understanding of medieval life, free from exaggeration. Castles were not always cold, gloomy fortresses. In fact, many were vibrant centers of daily life, filled with bustling kitchens, workshops, chapels, and courtyards. Servants, artisans, and families worked alongside lords and ladies, creating communities that thrived despite challenges. Knights were not always heroic, shining figures of chivalry. While training and tournaments were important, much of a knight's life involved administrative duties, overseeing land, and ensuring loyalty among vassals. Their role was less glamorous than legends often suggest. Daily meals were far from the extravagant feasts we imagine. Most people ate simple, hearty dishes: bread, vegetables, porridge, and occasionally meat. The wealthy enjoyed more variety, but even then, dishes were based on preservation, not luxury. Disease and sanitation were indeed challenges, but communities had systems for hygiene and health care, however rudimentary. Herbal remedies, baths, and local knowledge helped people survive and maintain daily life. Life was hard, but not devoid of intelligence or ingenuity. Religion played a central role, guiding moral, social, and cultural practices. Monks, nuns, and parish priests not only offered spiritual guidance, but also maintained education, agriculture, and record-keeping. Learning continued quietly, despite popular myths of widespread ignorance. Travel and trade were more active than often portrayed. Roads, rivers, and ports connected towns and cities, allowing merchants, pilgrims, and travelers to move goods, ideas, and culture across regions. Markets were lively centers full of bargaining, stories, and human interactions. Peasants were not passive or always oppressed. Many were skilled farmers, craftsmen, and tradespeople. Villages had systems of cooperation, festivals, and local governance. These communities were resilient, resourceful, and connected despite the hierarchical structures of feudal society. Fashion and clothing reveal more about the era than stories suggest. While royalty wore elaborate garments, most people dressed according to practical needs, climate, and available materials. Clothing indicated status but was also functional, durable, and adapted to daily labor. Hygiene was misunderstood in myths. Contrary to beliefs, bathing and cleanliness were valued. Public baths, personal hygiene rituals, and herbal infusions were common. Medieval people cared about appearance and health, even if access varied by wealth. Love and marriage were complex beyond fairy tale romance. Families, alliances, property, and social norms influenced unions. Affection existed, yet practical considerations often shaped decisions. Love letters, poems, and courtship rituals were real parts of life, not just fictionalized tales. Religion influenced art, literature, and architecture. Cathedrals, illuminated manuscripts, and tapestries reflected devotion and skill. Craftsmen and artists invested decades of labor, creating works of beauty that remain awe-inspiring today. Villages and towns were centers of innovation. Water mills, plows, and trade networks demonstrate practical intelligence. People solved problems, adapted to challenges, and built systems that supported life in varied landscapes. Healthcare was a mixture of folk wisdom and emerging medical practices. Physicians studied humors, surgeons performed basic operations, and apothecaries prepared remedies. While limited by knowledge, efforts to maintain health were consistent and evolving. Communication relied on letters, messengers, and town criers. News traveled slowly, but information networks existed, connecting villages to cities and courts. Stories, regulations, and commercial information moved across regions in surprisingly efficient ways. Religious festivals, fairs, and pilgrimages created rhythm in life. These events offered rest, celebration, and exchange of culture and goods. People valued leisure, storytelling, and communal engagement, even amid labor-intensive lives. Not all castles were luxurious. Some were defensive outposts or administrative centers. Yet these structures reflected careful planning, engineering, and a blend of practicality with occasional ornamentation. Misconceptions exaggerate darkness and misery far beyond reality. Knights' reputations were built on service, loyalty, and training. Heroic ideals exist, but reality required managing land, finances, and the responsibilities of leadership. Many knights were pragmatic, balancing prestige with practicality. As the Middle Ages stretch behind us, it is fascinating to revisit what we once believed about knights, castles, and daily life. Many stories passed down through centuries are not entirely accurate. Today, we explore a deeper understanding of medieval life, free from exaggeration. Castles were not always cold, gloomy fortresses. In fact, many were vibrant centers of daily life, filled with bustling kitchens, workshops, chapels, and courtyards. Servants, artisans, and families worked alongside lords and ladies, creating communities that thrived despite challenges. Knights were not always heroic, shining figures of chivalry. While training and tournaments were important, much of a knight's life involved administrative duties, overseeing land, and ensuring loyalty among vassals. Their role was less glamorous than legends often suggest. Daily meals were far from the extravagant feasts we imagine. Most people ate simple, hearty dishes: bread, vegetables, porridge, and occasionally meat. The wealthy enjoyed more variety, but even then, dishes were based on preservation, not luxury. Disease and sanitation were indeed challenges, but communities had systems for hygiene and health care, however rudimentary. Herbal remedies, baths, and local knowledge helped people survive and maintain daily life. Life was hard, but not devoid of intelligence or ingenuity. Religion played a central role, guiding moral, social, and cultural practices. Monks, nuns, and parish priests not only offered spiritual guidance, but also maintained education, agriculture, and record-keeping. Learning continued quietly, despite popular myths of widespread ignorance. As the medieval world continues to unfold, it's important to understand the diversity of life experiences. Not every lord or lady lived in constant luxury, and not every peasant endured endless misery. Communities were diverse, adaptable, and resilient. Trade routes connected distant regions, bringing spices, textiles, and ideas. Markets in towns buzzed with activity, showcasing the ingenuity of merchants and artisans. Information traveled slowly, yet news of events, births, and festivals often reached distant villages in surprising time. Food practices were more sophisticated than commonly believed. Preservation techniques like salting, smoking, and fermenting allowed for storage of perishable items. Spices were prized not only for flavor, but also for preservation and symbolic value. Craftsmanship flourished across the land. Blacksmiths, carpenters, weavers, and potters contributed to both practical and artistic creations. Tools, weapons, and household items were carefully made, reflecting skill and dedication, not mere primitive work. Education existed outside of monastic walls. Apprentices learned trades, young nobles studied languages and etiquette, and guilds maintained structured learning for craftsmen. Knowledge and skill were valued in all levels of society, contrary to myths of universal ignorance. Architecture was not only defensive but functional and aesthetic. Bridges, aqueducts, and cathedrals were marvels of engineering, often serving multiple purposes: protection, commerce, religion, and social gathering. Entertainment and leisure were important. Storytelling, music, games, and festivals provided relief from work and strengthened social bonds. People valued joy, creativity, and culture as much as survival and duty. Medical care was evolving. While limited, practitioners used herbal remedies, surgical techniques, and preventive care. Knowledge was shared among communities, and innovations slowly improved health outcomes. Knighthood involved complex responsibilities. Beyond warfare, knights managed estates, mediated disputes, and trained the next generation. Honor and prestige were balanced by practical obligations and political awareness. Religion guided ethics, law, and social norms, but daily life incorporated both sacred and secular elements. Monasteries and parish churches served not only spiritual but also educational, economic, and social functions. Villages were hubs of cooperation. Communal labor, seasonal festivals, and local governance created a structured yet flexible society. People relied on each other, shared resources, and solved problems collectively. The notion of widespread filth and disease is exaggerated. While hygiene challenges existed, baths, washing rituals, and sanitation systems were implemented in towns and wealthy households. Cleanliness mattered culturally and practically. Food culture included more than survival staples. Bread, porridge, meat, vegetables, and occasional delicacies reflected seasonal abundance. Communal feasts, harvest celebrations, and religious banquets brought communities together. Markets were centers of culture as well as commerce. Merchants shared stories, news, and innovations, connecting regions through